Thank you all for showing up to my session today. It's awesome seeing so many people here interested in the leader's leap. So today's presentation is going to be about a journey. I'm going to take you all on a journey with me, and I'm going to tell you some stories. Some of them are, or all of them are actually my personal stories as they happen. I hope you will draw a few lessons from those stories. And I will also give you some tools and strategies that help me on my journey from pure technologist, contributor, to leader catalyst. And this is a journey that a lot of people do, and I don't believe it looks the same for anyone. So like with any good movie or book or TV show, I want to start this presentation off with a disclaimer. We all have different journeys. We all come from different backgrounds. We're all going to encounter different obstacles. The things I talk about today, you might encounter some of them. You might encounter all of them. Or maybe you won't encounter any of them, and your journey is going to be completely different to my journey. But I still want to share with you the tool belt that I used. So hopefully, some people will avoid making the mistakes that I made and pay the prices I had to pay. Journey we're going to go through today is structured into 5 steps. So there's the call, the fear, then the leap, the abyss, and finally the climb. And again, you may start off in different places in this scale. And you'll see what I mean as we go along. Some of you might be right in the beginning, some of you might be in the middle. My name is Martin Mazur, and I'm the CTO of 1337. We're a software consultancy that helps our clients just build better products. And I have almost 20 years now in the software industry, all of them within consulting. And the thing is that through those 20 years, I've been through almost every role, including CEO for an extremely brief period, did not fit me. So I have this weird perspective on what's required in different areas. And that's what I hope to share with a lot of you, because I understand that not everyone is going to be as privileged as I have been throughout my career to experience a lot of these different things. So the journey, it starts. And it starts similarly for, I guess, most people in the room, since you came to this talk. You've been climbing your tower of technology. You've been doing that for a long time, maybe 5, 10, maybe 15 years. And we all get there different ways. For me, it all started when I was a child. So I got a Nintendo 8-bit. And there was, most kids want to just play the game. They want to play Super Mario and it'll be fun. And I was looking at that. I remember I was laying under a white sofa that we had on the floor. And I was just standing on the start screen at the first level, just pushing the red button. I saw this little guy jump. And I wasn't so interested in playing the game. I was interested in what makes him jump. Like, why is he jumping? And that's when I knew there was something about this tech, there was something this technology that was interesting to me. And 2 years later, I somehow, don't ask me how, coerced my parents to get me a computer. And that's when I started to learn BASIC, because somehow I figured out that the thing that makes this guy jump is code. And I want to do this code thing. And since then, I'm not going to give you all the boring story, but I ended up working with creating software as a programmer. And eventually, when you've climbed your tower of technology, you have this heavy dependence on technology. You know how to wield it, and you have this idea that this technology is going to solve all the world's problems. If you just use it correctly, it's going to solve everything. And your tower is very comfortable because you've been there for a while. So you know where you have all your things. you know how this stuff works, and people visit you and they come and ask for advice. They go like, I have this technology, how do I use it? And sometimes if you're in a good mood, you give them advice. And you have this vision of everything that's possible with the tech. And you can't possibly see that that anything else would be needed in the world. So in my career, in my path, this was when I said, I don't understand what the project managers do. Because when I worked, there used to be project managers. Now it might be I don't understand what the product owners do or product managers, or why do we even need designers. But you're so laser focused on your tech that you don't see anything else. And then at some point, you just feel this void inside of you and you go like, I might be missing something. there might be more to this thing than just the technology. You might see that you wrote the perfect code, but it didn't matter. And for me, this came in a huge project where I was a part. And it was a C++ project. And I worked on the code, and it was test-driven C++, which is, for anybody that knows how crazy that is, that's crazy. Properly test-driven, very good test coverage. And I was done. I was so proud of the code, and I went to the PM, and I was like, PM, and this was project manager, not product manager. I was like, I'm done. And they're like, good, polish the code some more. You're way ahead of schedule. I was like, all right. And I went back and polished my code and made it better. I refactored it. It's like, I'm done again. And they're like, good, polish your code. You're still way ahead of schedule. And that happened a few times. And I got moved to another project. I left the company, and 5 years later, that product was still never released. The perfect code, the perfect module, the perfect thing I wrote, it never saw the light of day. It didn't matter. My time didn't matter. My investment didn't matter. What I didn't matter in the greater scheme of things. So for me, it was this drive towards wanting to build products that matter. For others, might be seeing their colleagues not feeling well, or just thinking that there has to be a better way of working than what we're doing right now. And that's when this thing starts mulling over in the back of your head and you're going, maybe it's not only about the tech. Maybe there's something else to it. That's when the call happens. And the call is this idea when you stand in your tower of technology and you look out and you start thinking, what are the other things out there? And the thing we're going to talk about today is specifically leadership. And this is usually sometimes confused with this other tower that you see in the background here, which is the tower of management. And I don't want you to confuse them today, so I want to talk about what is the leadership tower. What is the leadership tower to me, and what I think it should be to you too. For me, leadership is providing vision. It's not exercising authority. So good leaders provide vision. Then they evangelize. They go first. They talk about that vision. And then they pull people with them. They don't push them in front of stuff. It's a set of attitudes. It's principles. It's priorities. This is what you do when you're a good leader. So basically, it's setting out a vision and it's facilitating the voluntary movement of people. Right? That's what you do. So recognize what I'm saying. It's what you do. Leadership is something you do. It's not something you are. People might label you a leader if you do this really well, but it's not a title. And it's also not one skill. This is also a thing. People are like, I'm going to learn leadership skills. No, like leadership is a conglomerate of a bunch of different things. It's about planning. It's about prioritizing. It's about empathy. It's about coaching. It's about being able to see how people are doing and about helping them move through those feelings. So the other thing that leadership is, it's also like one of the most sought after attributes of technologists nowadays. Because whether you call it autonomous teams or empowered teams or whatever you call it, all of those types of teams require a certain level of leadership. Not from one person on the team, but probably from a lot of people on the team. So let's get back to the calling. So you hear the calling, you go like, I need to go out there, I need to do something, right? And for whatever reason you're hearing the calling, like remember that, because you're going to need that energy as you move on the path. Again, for me, it was I wanted to build products that mattered. I wanted to be on teams that built products that matter. I wanted my time investment and investment of my colleagues to matter. And I understood that the way we were doing things wouldn't take us to the next level. And the reason I'm telling you to remember it, because the journey is tough, so you're going to need all of that when you start doubting why you're even doing it. Because next on the journey comes the fear. And this is that little voice inside and outside of you telling you not to do it. Because as you're standing in a tower of technology, you're going like, I'm really good at this. Should I really abandon my tower? Should I really abandon this comfort, this thing I have, that what I've built during 10 to 15 years? You may be tempted to doing compromises, like maybe I can do both. Maybe I can be great in this and that. You're contemplating. And the first issue you're going to have is yourself. Because right now you're having this internal argument. You're going like, I'm not sure I want to do this, I'm afraid, it's scary. And the reason you're having that is it's because it's something new. And remember, your tower is comfortable, and now you're talking about going somewhere where you don't know where that is. You don't know what's up in that other tower. And even if you get there, you won't have your stuff, you won't have your knowledge, you won't have your tools, you won't have anything. It's going to be super scary. And by that time, you've already left your comfort. So what do you do to deal with yourself? Well, one thing you can do is, of course, visualization, which is a great technique for trying to put yourself in that desired state. So look up to the people that you see leading the way you want to be leading, and imagine how your future would look if you were them. That puts you in a positive mind state, right? And then also draw on your past successes. I'm sure you've all led at some point. You've led yourself. You might have led other people. You led your children or like friends or something. Look at those successful moments and recount those. Those are important. And all of this is what I call dream big. Paint the vision, paint the picture. This is where we're going. But then start small. Don't go for the picture all at once, because that's how you get demoralized. Just go one step at a time, saying like, tomorrow I'm going to do this differently. And that's going to be my path to leadership. I'm going to approach my colleague differently, or I'm going to read something or take a course or ask for advice. For me, dealing with myself was a little bit easier. What was harder was dealing with others. Because what happens when you start doing this journey, or when you start talking to people about, like, I want to venture into leadership, like I want to explore this thing, is that the voices around you, specifically if you're really good at what you're doing, start speaking up, and they go like, well, Martin, are you really sure you want to do this? I mean, you're like one of the best software developers I know. Right? And there might be other voices. For me, it was actually my boss at the time. He was like, yeah, I'm not sure this is a good career choice for you. Like you're really good at what you're doing. Like maybe you want to pick something more technical. Like, but this might come from friends. It might come from spouses. And specifically in our industry, this is actually a big problem, because there's this like, oh yeah. So and then the leaders, those are the ones that can't code. Like this is you copped out. So there's going to be colleagues, managers, spouses, friends, family members. They're all going to have opinions about what you're doing for different reasons, job security reasons or whatever reasons. And it's really hard to deal with that, because when you get a lot of external pressure on you, it's really easy to kind of fold in that moment. But what you can do is you can get good at receiving feedback. So the way I view feedback is a gift. Somebody goes and they give you something, and you accept it, and you open it up, and you look at it, and you can decide what you want to do with it. Well, first you've thanked them because it was a gift, so thank you so much for giving me this feedback. And you look at it, and then you weigh it. Is this for me? Is this relevant? Should I internalize this? Should I put it somewhere else? Should I put it in storage? Or when they walk out the door, should I throw it in a trash bin because it's not exactly what I wanted or needed right now? And of course, be curious. Why? Why are you saying like this? Like, what's your concern? What are you thinking of? Because you want to find out more, and curiosity is also a good skill to hone as a leader. Whatever you do, don't start arguing with them. It's not a debate. You've made your choice. You're going on your journey. They can have their opinion, and you should take that in, be curious, figure out what that's about, and then move on. So once you've dealt with yourself and once you've dealt with others, you're probably not as scared as you were. You're confident that you want to go into this. You actually have to take the leap. You have to take the plunge. So you have to get down from your tower of technology in order to start marching to the tower of leadership. And there's several ways of doing this. And the first way is, of course, you jump. You're self-motivated. You want to do this. You've decided. You're saying, I'm going. And you're just jumping off, taking off. The second one is being pushed. Being pushed is when somebody in your vicinity tells you there's this great opportunity. I would like you to lead. Right? And I've pushed people in my career that I've seen qualities in that I think they should explore. So when somebody tries to push you, if they're good at what they're doing, they see something you might be missing. So weigh that opportunity. When somebody's trying to go like, I think you should do this. I think you should go here. There's this team. I suggest you try this out. But that's being pushed because you're not voluntarily taking the jump. Somebody else goes like, nah. And there's, of course, the tripping, which is essentially what happened to me, because for me, it was never intentional. I never decided I wanted to go into leadership. Nobody actually pushed me into leadership. I just started trying to make things better for the teams I was working on. And I ended up in these weird positions without a title, but being the person that was creating visions for the team and facilitating the voluntary movement of those people into one specific direction. And all of a sudden I was a leader without even knowing it. So, for me this was basically started when I picked up my first Agile book. And I was like, whoa, wow. And then there was like, oh, this is How to Win Friends and Influence People book. And then there's this other book. And all of a sudden it just happened. But whatever way you choose to get down from the tower, you somehow end up at the bottom. And sometimes the fear comes back when you're at the bottom. And I want to be clear about this because I've coached people where they've taken this plunge and they end up here, and then the fear comes back. And at that time, you might be tempted to run up the tower again and you go like, I'm backing out, I'm going back. And that's okay. You can do that. You can do that. You can take the jump many times, or you can be pushed many times. You can trip many times. And maybe it's a combination. Maybe you start tripping and somebody walks up to the edge and just gives you a push. It's not as clear cut. So it's okay if you've been down the tower and you went up again, it's okay to go down again. Like, it's not a one-time jump. This is why dude has a magic carpet. But then you end up in the absolutely darkest place on this journey. This is the abyss. Because this is when you feel your technical skills diminishing and your leadership skills are not quite there. So all of a sudden you feel not good at anything at all. You're just in this weird middle ground where I don't even know what I'm doing. And this is this long slug between these things, also called the dip or valley of despair. So if you came this far, you just have to accept that dip. You just have to accept that up until now, it's been pretty damn exciting. You've been getting over fears, you've been learning new skills, you've been confronting people around you and yourself, and you took the jump and you're in this position now, and oh damn, what do I do? The thing is, what you need to deal with in that segment of the journey is yourself, mostly. So first of all, what I see trips up a lot of technologists, what certainly trips up me, is your identity. Because when I walk around a conference floor and I go like, so hey, who are you? Like people usually say like, oh, this is my name and I'm a software developer. This is my name, I'm a data engineer, or this is my name, I work with operations or security or whatever. We have this strong identity. I write code, therefore I am developer. And the thing is, that builds a lot of self-confidence in us, being that thing. What it doesn't do is it doesn't build that much self-esteem. Because self-esteem doesn't come from what you do, it comes from who you are as a person. Being, empathetic or nice or gentle or firm or whatever. These are the qualities we have within ourselves. So what a lot of people lack in today's society, and especially I would say software developers, is self-esteem. We don't really believe in ourselves. We believe in our skills because so we have this self-confidence. When someone removes your skills from you, or when your skills start diminishing, you also start feeling really bad about that. So you can see this in children. Children are, they have so low skills in everything. So they're all about self-esteem, and there's this infamous misquote of Pippi Longstocking, which is basically she's been asked to doing something. And she's like, yeah, I know how to do that. I've never tried, so I'm sure I know how to do that. So what happens how do you get past this? Like, how do you form a new identity, which is not about programming or coding or sitting in front of a computer? So here's a morbid exercise you might want to try. So when people talk at funerals, they usually don't talk about, no, he was such a great software developer or accountant or whatever. The code he wrote was beautiful. So you can imagine that. You can imagine your own funeral, whatever way you want to imagine that, whatever, a funeral will look. And you can see people coming up and having the eulogies. And think about what they're saying about you. Those are the things you're going to need to build that self-esteem. And the next thing is, you just have to start leading yourself, because it's very naive to think that you can go and start, facilitate voluntary movement of others if you can't facilitate the voluntary movement of yourself in the first place. So I usually say that there's more opportunities to lead than there are people willing to lead. So anybody coming up to me says like, oh, I wish I could go into, doing more leadership stuff, being a leader, blah, blah, blah. I was like, so what's stopping you? Because in all organizations I've been in, there's always just stuff laying around which nobody wants to take on or run with or go with. So it starts with you. It starts with you deciding to do that and being your own leader, setting your own goals. And think about that, like if you were your own manager, so this is another exercise. If you were your own manager, how would you review yourself? Is that a good, or if you were your own leader, how would you review yourself? Is that a good leader? After a good day's work, what is the feedback that you give yourself? When you don't feel like doing something, how do you coach yourself? What's the voice in your head saying? Like, what are you doing? Like, is that who you want to be as a leader? So you have to start with being that person towards yourself that you're seeing you want to be towards others. And then, of course, you have to designate time into improving that inner leader. You have to set aside time slots for becoming better. And at that time slot, use the techniques you already know. So how many here do like agile retrospectives or retrospective or something like that? Okay, a lot of people. So you know how the technique works. You set the stage, you gather some data, you generate some insights, you figure out something to do, and then you decide for the next increment you're going to do that thing. You can do that by yourself. Sit down, be like, what went well for me this week? What didn't go that good? What are my improvements? Like, do I see any trends? What's my mission for next week? So use the things you already know, but make sure to set aside time for that reflection, for that self-improvement. It's not going to happen on itself. There's a good book also called Business Model Me, which could be interesting to some, where you can actually map out yourself and see like what are the key parts of me that make me tick. And then you have to also accept the investment. I remember I told you like your technical skills are diminishing, but your leadership skills aren't quite there. The reason that happens is because you have to accept the investment that leadership is a ton of different skills that you're going to have to learn. You're going to have to take that time out from somewhere. That time is going to normally come from the time you normally spend at becoming better at your tech stuff. So all of a sudden you're not keeping up, but that's okay because you've decided to be a leader. So, you have to take out that investment and manage your time and say, this is something I'm going to invest in. I'm going to put time into this in order to improve these things. And if you're not prepared to do that, you should probably not be taking this jump or leap yet. So imagine we've done all of this. You've kind of went through this long slug, and you decided you want to invest, and you're okay with yourself, and you're feeling that, all right, I'm about to do this journey, and then starts the climb, which is the actual work. So the climb is, the way that leadership work looks. There's the things we do. And I think my main point here, which I can't stress enough, is this idea that all of a sudden you have to accept that you just went from contributor to catalyst. What do I mean by that? What you ship doesn't matter. What the people around you ship does. And that's a really tough mindset to get into. And the reason this is my most important point is because this is the point that burnt me. Literally burnt me out. Because what happens is you try to also be the best coder on your team while you're trying to lead everybody else. So you're trying to ship the hardest features, you're trying to do the most pull requests, you're trying to review everybody else's code at the same time as you're trying to set a vision and facilitate everybody's voluntary movement into one direction. And you have technologies and things you have to take care of, and meetings you have to go to, and stakeholders that you need to manage. And all of a sudden you're working evenings to commit code that you weren't supposed to be writing. This doesn't mean you have to stop technical work. It just means you have to do technical work differently. For me, this was deciding I would not have my name on a single commit. I would not have my name on a single story. I can sit with people, we can pair program, I can work on stuff together with others, but I won't own it. Because the other thing that sometimes happens, this didn't happen to me, but I've seen this happen to other people, is they end up owning the core pieces of the code base as leaders. Because they think that their role as leaders is to build the most thing at the center of the code. They have a team all around them. Nobody understands what the center does. So when stuff breaks, they come pulling at that person, and they're in a meeting with the CEO about some future project. So recognize this: you just went from contributor to catalyst. Your job is not to ship stuff anymore. Your job is to help others ship stuff. Then comes the idea of adapting to others. Because when we visualize how we want to be as leaders, we do that from a position of being very senior, and also from the position of being the way we are. So for me, it's being a white man, and then I think, oh, so how do I want the leader to be? So I specifically think about how white men in my tech capacity want to be led. And then I form that leadership, and that's not going to go over very well. You're going to be a very good leader for one specific type of people. So what a good leader needs to figure out is, how do I recognize what type of leadership you need and what type of leadership you need? Because you're all going to need different types of leadership at different points in your career. For me, the most significant thing was I thought I wanted to be this coaching servant leader, because that's the leader I always wished I had. So that's what I'm going to be. And I was that leader in the beginning. It was great, as long as I had a senior team. And we started having junior team members join, and it started going not so well. And then, of course, I was immature, so it was their fault. Like, they couldn't get with the program. It wasn't my fault as a leader. But then I learned about this, which is situational leadership, which basically tells you that depending on a person's scale, they're going to be going from here, they're going to be going from here, so they have this high need for high direction and kind of low support, into there, which is low direction and low support. So your juniors, or like early people in skills, are going to be over here, where it's very good for you to go in as a leader and say, hey, listen, I want you to do these things in this way. You do some of them, and I'll check back with you in 4 hours, and we'll see how you're doing on this, right? Checklists. Boom, boom, boom. And then as they grow, you can go into a more coaching position. And eventually you're going to move into a position where people can direct themselves, but they're very unmotivated to do so. So maybe you're becoming more supportive. Let's do this together. Come on, we can work on this problem. You're my peer, like we can figure it out. And then you're going to have the last level of people, which is super valuable, which basically they're leaders in their own right. You can just give them a problem and they run with it. But you need to recognize where each person on your team is in this scale and adapt your leadership style into that person. So not approach everybody the same way. Otherwise, you're only going to be really good at one leader. And then, of course, there's empathy, which I won't talk about today, but that's going to help you kind of figure out, what other people are thinking a little bit as well, and going into their situations. And then there's the time management part, which is like, it's as soon as you move out of this contributor role, your time is a free-for-all. Because now there's nobody guarding your time. So there's just these requests pouring in, expectations of what you're supposed to be doing, meetings you're supposed to be attending. And everybody else has an agenda for you to do, or something they wish you want to do. And if you say yes to all of it, your calendar is going to look like a broken Tetris game, meaning the lines never disappear, they just fill up. And you go like, this is not the way it's supposed to be. So this is tough. It's tough to set these boundaries and figure out what are the things I'm supposed to be doing. And this is like classic one. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it a million times. But trying to categorize all the things coming into you in this kind of important, important urgent type of thing, and trying to see which ones you should manage, prioritize, minimize, or eliminate. Sometimes it says delegate as well, but it's not always possible, is going to be key to figuring this stuff out. And the analogy that made it for me was, if you see a million balls like coming, if you're on a goalie and you see a lot of balls coming your way, right? You need to figure out which ones are the one I should go after, because not all of them are of the same importance. So that becomes a really good skill. But for that, you need to have your own agenda. You need to know what you're working on, what your team is working on. So when people ask you for your time, you can look at that and say, like, this makes sense for me and my team, so I will honor this request or contribute to this thing, or I will not. This is the last point, almost the last point I'm going to make for today, and probably the most controversial one. And it's about genre. So what about genre? If you go on Netflix and you look at the covers of movies, you can by the cover of the movie identify what type of movie it is. Is it an action movie? Is it a romantic comedy? Is it, you know, a late night comedy? Is it stand-up? Is it, you know, something else? Is it a sitcom? Just by looking at the cover. Same thing with books. If you go into a bookstore, you look at books, you can see this is a sci-fi novel and this is a fantasy novel. They all have genre. People have genre too. You look at a person, you immediately go and say, ah, this and this person is, oh, one of those, or it's like that. And we do it unconsciously all the time. So think about it like this. If you're working on a software team, and you have a new team member joining, and they show up with a really expensive suit. I'm not talking, you know, that's like a really expensive Italian suit. Really nice shoes, nice hair. They walk in. Do you think that they're a good developer? Now, when you go to a management meeting in t-shirt and jeans, this is what happens. And this is why it's the most controversial point, because I feel that people should be able to dress and present any way they like. And this is what I did for a long time in my leadership role. Learning that I have to spend 20 to 30 minutes sometimes convincing people that I have the right to even be in the room and that I have the right skills to talk on certain subjects. And at some point I said, this is not worth my time. And I bought some shirts, I bought a jacket, I bought some better shoes, and I was like, all right, this is what I'm going to do. And it doesn't mean you have to change your personal style. Like, I still like to have tattoos and bracelets, and, you know, sometimes, you know, you can still personalize what you do, but you have to figure out how the leaders around you in your organizations or the organizations you're going to be addressing present, and kind of go into that mode. Because it's going to save you a lot of time. So it's more about how many uphill battles do you want to fight? Is it worth it to you? Covers matter, genre matters, basically. Because you want to know if it's an action movie or a comedy before you click it. So we've been through the journey, but there's this one step that I haven't talked about. And I want to talk about it before we close out today. And that's the return. That's a step that I feel a lot of leaders that come from tech miss. And that's never forgetting where you came from, because these are the people you're going to be leading. So remembering, you know, that person that stood in another tower, how they thought, who they were, what they thought of leaders and everything else, and the projects and OKRs and whatever, that's going to be relevant to you. So never forget where you came from, because that's going to distinguish you from people that haven't had the technology journey before. So on closing note, we went through this. The call: find your reason to lead and stick to it. The fear: build your self-confidence, learn to take feedback. The leap: cross the threshold, decide to go into leadership. The abyss: rebuild your identity, lead yourself first, reallocate your resources into developing leadership skills. The climb: become a catalyst adapt to the needs of others, manage your time, present yourself, and then the return. Remember who you are and where you came from. And if you only take with you one thing today, it's that leading starts with yourself. It doesn't start with other people. Thank you so much.